Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. We've got part 3 of our Q&A series for June coming at you right now. This will be covering the Patreon questions. So we already did cover a lot of the YouTube community tab questions in parts 1 and 2, so go back and check those out. If you did miss them, we've still got social distancing monitor Steve over here with his little stand belly going on there. And yeah, let's just get straight into the questions. First question, do you feel there will be a sufficient performance increase in the next gen release of graphics cards, NVIDIA 3000 series, to warrant a consideration/budget plan for an upgrade to a 1080 Ti? Not a major gamer, as the card is more Adobe Premiere production, work environment with gaming as a secondary function, 32-inch 4K 60 monitor, would like to play 1440p 60, medium to high settings, with potentially current and next gen games. I think based on a lot of the things you're saying here, sort of more content creation work with Premiere, you only got a 4K 60 monitor, you want to play maybe 1440p 60 FPS, medium to high settings, the 1080 Ti is still a pretty good card for today, and I would expect that moving into the next couple of years, given it's around the sort of RTX 2080 performance, that you're still going to get a pretty good experience with what you're after with sort of your 1440p, and especially with things like Premiere production workloads. I wouldn't have thought that next generation cards will give you that much more there, given a lot of it, they probably will improve the encoding engine and stuff like that. But I'd say that for a lot of that sort of stuff, yeah, the upgrade you're going to get is more from sort of your gaming side of things. So I would have thought you should probably just wait and see what comes out, given that's still quite a high-end card these days and could still function exactly as you want it to. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add. It's really hard to comment on this kind of stuff without seeing the performance, because what would we have said about the RTX series?
Probably would have thought that was going to be a bit of more of a performance upgrade than we got, especially in that price range.
I mean, surely we're not seeing that kind of price to performance ratio again, but yeah, I'd rather comment on this sort of thing once we've benchmarked it quite extensively. All right, next one here. When will we see 4800U laptops?
Hopefully pretty soon. Yeah, so short answer to this one. I think some of them are already on the market now. We're just working through with AMD getting some of those laptops in. So it should be very soon we'll be able to see the flagship performance. So pretty simple answer to that one.
Will the PCIe Gen 4 chipset link provided by the X570 chipset on motherboards confer any advantage over a Gen 3 chipset link utilized by B550? I assume the current difference is similar to PCIe 3 versus PCIe 4 for graphics cards, but I wonder if it's possible for Zen 3 to utilize the additional bandwidth. It's not really the processor that utilizes the additional bandwidth. Like the Zen 3 processors won't really be any different. It's really about the devices that utilize the bandwidth. So you SSDs, for example, and graphics cards as mentioned. Basically, with the thing with B550 and X570, so what is utilized from the CPU are the PCIe 4.0 lanes on the CPU, which B550 chipsets can use. You get 16 lanes for your storage, and then 16 lanes for your graphics card, and then 4 lanes for your storage. The X570 motherboards have additional lanes for additional storage or other devices that you may connect through PCI Express slots and things like that. So, really, I think for throwing a number out there, 90% plus of our audience, B550 is going to be fine. Like having primary storage and your display, I can't see that being a problem, like not having enough PCIe 4 lanes for the foreseeable, potentially, many years down the track. Yeah. So really, you only buy an X570 board if you're building more of a, would you say, a workstation PC?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
For some reason you need
high-end workstation, multiple PCIe 4.0 drives. Maybe you've got really high-performance LAN cards or something as well that you want to use all simultaneously through that chipset link. Then that's where it would make a lot of sense. But for most people, as you say, 90% plus, B550 is going to be fine.
And as I was sort of saying earlier in part 1 or part 2 of the Q&A, for a lot of these storage things, we're talking about really big burst bandwidth, but when it comes to sustained read-write performance, again, we haven't tested this, so I'm not really talking from experience, but from what I've seen from other testing, it looks like those sustained read-write performance isn't that different on PCIe 4.0 drives opposed to PCIe 3.0 drives. So even right now, it's like, I don't know how much difference that's really going to make for you.
All right, next question. Imagine a scenario where someone is using a 144Hz monitor and a very strong GPU, so FPS is always above, let's say, 200 with a 150 1% low. If you were to limit your frame rate in the driver to 143 FPS, so you always fall under the FreeSync limit, and that is quite a good idea. A lot of people advocate for doing that. Will the minimum frame rate be equal to the average and thus result in a flat line? So theoretically, that is basically what should happen. You should just get a very rock solid frame rate. Obviously the 1% low number is, potentially 1% of your performance could be below that, but definitely 99% of the time with the numbers that you're sort of saying there, you should just get a very consistent 143 FPS experience if your GPU is powerful enough for that. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers that one.
They're going to be very, very close. So there may be some sort of maybe latency penalty here and there that will sort of see a little bit of a difference, but we're talking very tight tolerances, whereas, on the graphs you may see that much difference between the 1% low and the average, and you're sort of going to bring it into like that tight tolerance for really smooth, consistent gameplay. But whether that's beneficial over just letting it fly depends on probably the gamer and the game. All right, Nick has a question here for both of us. There have been leaks on an unannounced 8TB Samsung 870 QVO drive for $800 to $900 US. While the price isn't great, it is nice to see super high capacity drives perfect for game storage coming onto the market. I think Tim and I can attest to that since we fill up our SSDs on our test systems quite regularly. What are your thoughts on the speed at which SSD manufacturers are bringing the price down per gigabyte? Are they dropping prices fast enough for your liking, or do you think prices should be dropping faster? Well, as someone who buys these things, naturally we think the prices would be, or could be dropping faster for sure. But development, while not as fast as we would like as someone who buys this sort of stuff, I don't think it's been at too much of a standstill. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I think these days you can get very affordable, like 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte, or even 500 gigabyte drives, particularly things like your sort of Intel 660p type stuff, which is, that's an NVMe SSD with PCIe, 3.0 capabilities. So we're talking pretty good performance drives for very affordable prices these days. So yeah, of course, buying like your 4 terabyte, your 8 terabyte SSDs is going to cost you a sweet fortune because of the, you're buying a flagship product. There's always a price premium there. But for more your standard drives, I think most people are buying. The pricing these days is pretty good and seems to be dropping reasonably well enough. I mean, just a couple of years ago, buying a 1 terabyte drive was very expensive, and nowadays it's not. So I think it's reasonable.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, games are getting bigger, and so that's why people are sort of wanting the bigger drives. But as you say, I think for most people, like just the performance uplift you get from going from a hard drive to an SSD is huge. And the fact that you can get a 1 terabyte one, which really for most people is enough, is good. It's good stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, obviously we want them to get bigger and cheaper as fast as possible. But
interested in your thoughts on this next one, Steve. How should I power my RTX 2080 Ti? Should I be using 2 separate cables, as in 2 separate rails? I currently use 1 cable with a splitter. Does this matter or not as much nowadays, or does it depend on my PSU? This person in particular has a Corsair RM850i, so 850 watt, 80 plus gold modular power supply. I see both arguments when I Google this. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
I think with that power supply you're okay, but like you've got the option to use 2 separate cables, so you absolutely should. Like, unless there's really a reason for why you don't want to use the 2 cables, then I don't see why you wouldn't. Like, what are the downsides of using 2 cables? Your cable management's slightly harder, that's about it. But you should definitely use the 2 cables. Again, it's not going to destroy the card or your power supply by using a single cable, but you can run into stability issues. So some people have seen their system crashing, they've had no idea why, and it turns out they should have just plugged in the second cable, and that would have solved their problem. You happen to have a particularly good power supply, so it's probably going to be okay, but I would recommend just using the 2 cables. It's really simple.
Yeah, and I guess as well it does depend sort of some cables, you get the 1 cable coming off and they've got multiple PCI connectors on the end, or alternatively you could actually be using like splitters and stuff that turn 1 actual output into 2, and definitely that is something that I would definitely stay away from. Definitely,
absolutely.
Yeah, use the cables that
indicates. That's right. That indicates that the power supply manufacturer knows that particular line can only carry enough power or current for 1 connector. So going and essentially modifying it yourself. That's just asking for trouble.
But yeah, I agree totally. More cables splits the current delivery over multiple wires. That's going to bounce it out better, give you better results most of the time. This should be another simple question to answer. So yeah, this person says, I absolutely love the Borderlands 3 optimization videos, etc., giving viewers a guide on how to balance between quality and frame rate. Will there be similar types of videos for upcoming releases such as the new Assassin's Creed or Cyberpunk 2077? So yeah, there hasn't been one on the channel for a while now because there hasn't been a lot of game releases, or at least games that really need that sort of guide. Not every game comes out in a poor state or something where your GPU is really pushed to the limits and needs those sort of videos. So, you know, if Cyberpunk and Assassin's Creed warrant that sort of video, then yeah, there'll be that sort of video. But if they're really well optimized out of the gate, more in line with something like a Gears 5 type game, then probably wouldn't bother with it. So it really depends. We'll assess those games when they come out. You'll probably be doing a lot of GPU benchmarks for those sort of things. So we'll get a pretty good idea early on and then get to work on those optimization guides. As always, it could be a couple of days after those games come out before we can produce that sort of video. But yeah, we'll be working hard in October, November when all that stuff usually comes out. Given the high prices of B550 boards, do you think it would be viable for AMD to give A520 the same feature set as B450, so PCIe 3.0 only, etc., rather than locking down overclocking support and memory tuning to create artificial segmentation?
Sure, that would be okay, I suppose, but they're not going to do that.
It's unfortunate they're not going to do that, in my opinion. I think there's a good opportunity there to do exactly this.
Yeah, but AMD seem pretty comfortable just selling previous generation products. I mean, you've seen what they've done with second-gen Ryzen. Like, you can still buy second-gen Ryzen parts at good prices, really competitive discounted prices. So the AIBs I spoke to kind of stressed that, you know, don't focus so much on B550 pricing. Obviously, they want to say that, but they're like, B450 is not going anywhere. So our excellent value B450 boards will remain on the market.
Yep.
So if B450 boards are fulfilling that market segment now, and I don't know for how long, there's really no point bringing in A520 boards to do the same thing if you've already got those boards. I guess the only thing
would be sort of future CPU support as opposed to more the sort of PCIe 3 stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah, basically AMD has confirmed beyond a shadow of a doubt that the A series is definitely going to be locked down. We're not going to fight them on that because if, you know, they offer the B550 boards. And look, the B550 thing's kind of hard. I've explained this, and you've even explained it in your News Corner video. Yeah, they're a little inflated right now. A small percentage for the boards that are available, like we're talking $20. But for that $20, they are significantly better in terms of VRM quality, and you get these new features. So it's like, are they that overpriced? And there are some cheaper B550 boards that are yet to hit the market. We know they're coming, and yeah, they're not going to be $70, but you know, they might filter down there once B450 stock runs out. So it's with the whole global pandemic thing, the supply chain issues, all that kind of stuff, it's really hard to gauge where pricing's at the moment. So I don't think that the A520 chipset is necessarily a solution to that, because that faces all the same problems, and we haven't even seen those boards yet and what prices they'll come in at. But yeah, obviously unlocking on all the boards would be good, but that's just not the point of the A520. Yep. It's meant to be more of an OEM type product that has all those lockdowns because that's what that market wants, and which is why we stay out of it. I guess I'll read this one out because it kind of leads on to what we were just saying. Hey guys, since B550 is replacing B450/X470 in terms of price and performance, how much longer do you expect B450 chipset will be produced? Well, I was just saying with AMD, it wouldn't surprise me in the least if they produced it in volume for the next 2 years. But I'm certainly not saying that's what they'll do. It could be out of stock in the next month. So I really have no expectations there. Trying to predict what AMD does with any of these things, good luck with that. So yeah, at this point though, the AIBs I've spoken to, they're like, look, B450 is not going away overnight. It's going to be hanging around for a bit. So, you know, in the case of something like the MSI B450 Tomahawk, if you want a board for around $100, not that that is $100 anymore, that's the other thing. But if you want a board that's a bit cheaper, buy that. But as I said, all board pricing is just pretty bad right now. Like the B450 boards that were down around $110 are now up near $200, I think. So not good.
Yep. Right, next question. How hard do you think it is for a factory to fully calibrate each panel really, really well, as if you did display cal for every panel they manufacture for a high-end product? There have been examples of this in the past, such as the Acer X27 or the Asus variant, but they didn't seem to be that impressive compared to a full calibration. So obviously, if a manufacturer wants to calibrate every single panel individually, that's going to add, potentially hours to the validation stage of each monitor. So, that's not really going to be viable for sort of mid-range budget products. It's going to be more of a higher thing, which you do mention, and you do see it from time to time with products like the Acer X27. And, the differences between, as you say here, like the actual factory calibrated results versus a full calibration, a lot of that can be down to how long they want to run the calibration for, what their tolerances are and that sort of thing. So, if I set a tolerance of a delta E of 1, for example, that might be different to the factory that sets a delta E tolerance of 3. So, yeah, that tends to be why you see some of those variances. But yeah, a lot of the time, manufacturers do at least attempt to calibrate to a general standard their monitors. So they might calibrate one monitor and then apply that to all the monitors they produced. And sometimes that can get pretty close, but sometimes they don't even bother doing that. They just produce the monitor as is, or a lot of the time you see monitor manufacturers using the wrong sort of standards to calibrate to, so you end up with like blue tints at the factory and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot of things going on there. I think that it would be possible for high-end monitors. I think it should be a thing for high-end monitors, but how far they go really depends on what they're looking for and how much time and effort they want to put in.
Okay, hi guys. AMD created the 5500 XT 4GB, then recently said 4GB GPUs are essentially obsolete for modern games. They've kind of shot themselves in the foot on this one. What are your thoughts on this? I don't know exactly what they said. I missed the slide or whatever, but Tim says you saw it, Tim?
I saw it briefly. It's something that sort of popped up as I was looking through news stuff, as I do every week, but I'm pretty sure I have seen some sort of slide where AMD was talking about the benefits of using 8 gig for cards and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I think they were probably talking... Their cards generally have more VRAM. They're probably talking more about high-end gaming, like high-quality settings, ultra-type quality settings. 4GB cards are obsolete for that. Whether they were saying they're obsolete entirely for gaming, I'm not sure. I probably should have researched this one. I didn't see it until just now. So, yeah, it's kind of a similar thing when we say quad cores are dead. It's like, well, depends on your price point. Like $100 quad core, like the 3100 or whatever, that's pretty good. But you wouldn't want to pay $200 for it anymore. And I think it's the same with these graphics cards. 4GB, all right, if you're getting a really cheap card. Ideally, you want more. But on a cheap card, you're usually dialing down the quality settings. So you're not looking for Ultra HD texture packs. So maybe that's what they meant for sort of your more mid-range to higher-end gaming.
All right, next question. What is the difference between D65P3 and DCI-P3, and what influenced your decision with which one to report in monitor reviews? So both those use the P3 color space, which is why they've got P3 on the end. So the actual color gamut is exactly the same. The difference is that DCI P3 is more of a cinema standard. So that's meant for your sort of movie studios making films and stuff. And so your cinema projector is going to be calibrated to DCI P3, and then the film is going to be also mastered to DCI P3. And what it has is essentially two differences compared to D65. It's got a 6300K white point compared to 6500K, so it's a little bit more yellow or warm by default, and also has a different gamma curve. So it doesn't use the sRGB gamma curve like D65, instead uses gamma 2.6. So it's just a bit, the image quality is a bit different there. And I think D65 P3 or Display P3 or whatever you want to call it it's just a better standard for monitors, because most content is not going to be produced with that different white point or gamma in mind. So on a computer, you're still going to be using your sRGB gamma curve and your 6500K white point. So from my perspective, it makes more sense to use D65 P3 for calibration, because that's just representative of the content that you'll be displaying on that monitor. But DCI P3 still has its place in the cinema and professional sort of movie industry world. So yeah, that's really why there's the two standards. For all the hardwares you have to buy to test, have you guys considered the option of buying the item, test it extensively, then return them within the allowed RMA period? It should work for most online retailers, right? Also, it should save you a lot of bucks when you have to, buy an expensive item yourself to test, say, a gaming laptop. So again, whether you can do this or not is kind of, it's a bit dodgy to do it in my opinion, but also it does depend a lot on the retailer and the company in question. A lot of companies and retailers have like no change of mind returns, which this would fall under, because it's not a defective product after you've tested it, it still works. So, and a lot of the time as well, they could have a very narrow return period. So it might be like a 7-day, 14-day returns for change of mind type purchases. So a lot of the time that wouldn't really be compatible with the sort of testing that we want to do, because it's either not long enough or doesn't exist at all. So yeah, generally we're just fine with buying the products and then dealing with it later.
Yeah, I think taking advantage of retailers to review and make a profit off a product probably isn't a really good way of going about that. And we don't need to, because we have really good support from our Patreon members. So
Yep.
It allows us to sort of buy it, test it, and like with Tim's A15 laptop, it goes on the shelf. If there's something he needs to do with it later down the track, he can dig it out and do that testing and
Yep.
get the Dremel out and cut more holes in it.
Hopefully not. Next question. Bit of an odd one, apparently. But what are your thoughts on, or do you think we will ever see bladeless fans, which have been out for years now, integrated into PC cases? Or do they have no fit in the world of computer hardware? I'm imagining a case similar to the Alienware Aurora oval case, but with sort of an oval bladeless fan at both the front and back of the case as one large push-pull design. So it's an interesting question. I think we've seen, there's a lot of, you can buy those like Dyson Airblade type stuff, which, has sort of the air pushed from something at the bottom into that sort of design for better airflow. It's an interesting thought. I think could work.
I hate to say never. I don't think it would work unless you are building like... I don't see how it's practical, because the way they work is, so they're not bladeless for a start. It's a bit of a misleading marketing term. Yeah. They have a turbine in the bottom, like what you would find on the, either the intake or exhaust side of a turbo, but it's basically same sort of turbine you would find in a turbo. Sits in the bottom, draws air in from the bottom of like a pedestal type tower, sucks in the air there, puts it up to the ring, it angles it out, and it creates a low pressure zone behind the ring that draws more air through. So I think that's where it gets the majority of its air, from the low pressure zone. But anyway, that's how it works. So when you think about a computer fan, obviously the blades there draw air from that side, push it through, and that goes in the case. So, and the idea is to suck cool air in from this side and push it through. So with the bladeless thing, you'd need like, where would the pedestal thing be? Would it be on the inside of the case, or would it be like some weird design where it pokes out the front and then it sucks air from outside? It's just super overcomplicated, and I'm not even sure pushing the air into a box that would even work, because as I said, it grabs the air from the low pressure zone behind it, and you have to have nothing in front of it, sort of creating a blockage, a resistance there.
Yep.
And then the turbulent air that then follows after it sucks more air in from there. So it's a thing that works in an open room, but it's not something that would work for pushing air into an object with a lot of sort of static pressure, I suppose. Yep. I don't really see how it could ever work. It's far too complicated, far too expensive and complicated to be used as a case fan. So I don't think you'll ever see it. It's just the wrong technology, wrong application for the technology.
I could only think of maybe like a really niche OEM making an entire system saying, "Oh, we've got bladeless fans in this," or something like that. I think you won't see a case with it.
Yeah, my limited understanding of how it works, I don't see how it's technically possible. But
yep,
I don't know. As Tim said, not an aerodynamics engineer, so
yep,
maybe you will see it. What storage setup do you use for your video production workflow and backups? Any RAID/NAS or online? Well, with Australian internet, online wouldn't work particularly well. That'd be nice if we could put it online somewhere and we could, get each other's B-roll and stuff like that. Usually I have to request that Tim upload something if I want it. NAS would be a pretty good solution. I used to have a NAS server, but that was a long time ago. At the moment, for my editing PC, I just have local storage, and I've set that up in a RAID. So I just have a series of 14 terabyte drives, I think they are. And a lot of the really old video stuff, although I do back it up and move it sort of off the computer, I really rarely go to that because it's older, crappier looking footage. So generally, as we update the cameras and that, I keep most of the products so I can go back and just refilm them, which is what I find myself doing more often than not. Is just updating that footage rather than reusing the old stuff.
Yeah, so I'm pretty similar. I've got most of the sort of working files. I think I've got the last 3 years worth of footage in my actual editing rig. So just no RAID setup or anything, just one drive per year. So I think I've got like a 3 terabyte for 2018 and then 8s for the last 2 years. And that just covers all that stuff fine. I do also use...
So you just manually back those up? Is that what you do with those?
Well, sort of the content from 2018 and 2019, I've just got sort of offline backups of those. So pretty straightforward.
That's true.
Because the data's never going to change on those drives. So I just have those drives just out of the system. And then for the current working drive from this year, I just back that up manually every once in a while. But a lot of the time, like that, the footage that's on that drive is also going to be repeated on my main working SSD. So that would be like the local projects that I'm working on at the moment. So I've got a 1 terabyte NVMe SSD that does all that stuff. And then I still keep a lot of the storage on the actual camera storage as well. So I could have up to a month or 2 months of storage on the actual camera drives as well. So it ends up just getting backed up in a number of different locations, and doing those manual backups every month or so that I usually do tends to be sufficient. But again, as much as it is critical to have a lot of that data as well, a lot of the B-roll and stuff is in the videos on YouTube that if worst comes to worst and everything, gets corrupted or something, I can still pull it from the YouTube content. So yeah, there's just a lot of good ways to sort of, there's no major storage server. I don't think either of us have a major storage solution that we have sitting around that's got like 100 terabytes of space on it. I do have a storage server for some older stuff and other stuff, but yeah, that's just it basically.
Yeah, I'll probably update my stuff next year maybe. I don't know, I'll see when I get time and a new studio and room and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, it works for now, so that's the main thing. Doesn't slow us down with our workflow. No dramas. All right, final question here, addressed to both of us. When people ask both of you, what do you do for a living? Have you come up with a more technical term rather than YouTuber? Think along the lines of explaining what a 32-game benchathon is to a non-technical person. Yeah, me personally, no, not really, because it doesn't really matter. Like, I always find it interesting when you ask someone what job they do, and they tell you some job title that's completely meaningless, at least to you, and then you're like, what does that entail? And they sort of explain it. It's like, oh, that's nothing like what I thought that job description meant. Whereas at least with a YouTuber, well, we make videos that go on YouTube. I mean, that's a pretty big part of it. But generally when you sort of explain it, or you give them a simple sort of answer, most people want to know more. And it's like, so yeah, it becomes it's not an easy conversation. I've not really had a quick one about that. What about you, Tim?
No, neither. I think most of the stuff I've come up with doesn't make people not want to talk about it. So just using YouTube or, I test PC hardware or something like that's usually what I say. And usually it's like, oh, that sounds pretty interesting. It's like, yeah, I guess it is.
I'm often like, I try to like shut the conversation down if they're not interesting. And I'm like, well, if you're like really computer techie nerdy, maybe it's interesting to you.
Yeah.
But I think most people don't run into somebody that makes YouTube videos for a living. So that's just a new and intriguing thing. Whereas if you run into someone who's a doctor or whatever, that's a pretty cool job that's hard to get or whatever, but it's like they've been around for a while. It's old news. So, as important as doctors are. So anyway, that's that one.
And that just about does it for, all of the Q&A series for June. Thanks to everyone for submitting the questions on both the Patreon in our little Discord chat that we've got going on and also on the YouTube community tab. What else is there to say?
Congratulations. Well, congratulations for making the 20% club.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, we always talk about that. So
we've got to make that T-shirt, the 20% club.
Yeah, so really appreciate everyone that does watch it all the way to the end and watches all of this outro as well, because we usually just stuff around and stuff and say, subscribe to the channel. You've already heard all this stuff before. The 20% club knows about the Patreon page that you can sign up and ask Discord questions and all that sort of thing. So, what else more is there to say? It's been a good one. I reckon it's been some really interesting questions. So,
whoops, I just shook my monitor. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to. There's no earthquake happening here. But it's been a good series of Q&As, as they often are. A lot of good questions, a lot of fun. We had a good live stream with the Patreon members. And there's been plenty of interesting content this month.
Yep.
All things considered. So that's been good. And hopefully next month can be the same. I don't know.
sounds good.
We'll see when we do this again, roughly this time next month. Actually, this might even be in next month by the time we release it.
Oh, could be. We're usually a bit dodgy with that. Maybe we'll post the Q&A on like July 1st or something. Hopefully not, though. Yeah. We'll see.
Just pretend you're watching.
It's all in June, yeah. So, yeah, pretty much it.
Yeah, do the like, subscribe thing. If you're interested in our Patreon account, the link's in the video description. There's some pretty cool stuff over there. We have an awesome Discord chat. Tim's very active in there, particularly in the monitor and laptop sections. So that's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, good community over there on Discord. Live stream, as I said, behind the scenes videos. Tim's going to do a behind the scenes video soon, aren't you, Tim?
Oh, yep.
Aren't you, Tim? But yeah, that's all cool. But anyway, above all else, thanks for being in the 20% club. I mean, you guys rock. That's awesome. And we'll see you in a video on the channel probably tomorrow.
Yep. See you in the next one.
I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
See you next time.